Does anyone remember a little MMO called Everquest Next? Announced by Sony Online Entertainment back in 2013, Everquest Next is a sandbox MMORPG that will supposedly feature dynamic content, intelligent AI, and a world that literally and permanently changes as the game goes on. I say supposedly because despite its ambitious goals and initial positive reception, what followed this game's announcement was a downward spiral of corporate mismanagement, buyouts, layoffs, and a community filled with distrust and vitriol toward the developers and each other. Outside of the hardcore MMO communities, few people even remember this game's announcement. To those who do remember, it's become a polarizing topic. To some, it's a masterpiece in the works, and if we're patient, it'll come out when it's ready and everything will be okay. To others, it's an example of what happens when a development company has ambitious ideas, but lacks the resources, timetable, and proper management to make it happen. At this point, many people are starting to call the game vaporware, a term used to describe software that is announced to make a company look good to its investors and to entice consumers, but never actually sees the light of day. But is Everquest Next vaporware? How did this game go from being one of the most anticipated MMOs of the year to a sore, faded memory? Why do some people care so much about this particular game's well-being? Well, let's take a look. Now, before we talk about the problems plaguing this troubled product, let's talk about why people were excited about this game in the first place. Everquest Next, if the developers are to be believed, is meant to be the next innovation in MMOs. It can be argued that Everquest defined the modern MMO, and Next was supposed to represent the next generation of what an MMO can do. How did it plan on doing that? Well, here's a quick rundown on how the game is supposedly going to work. The game world is composed of voxels. I'm not going to get into the details of what a voxel is here, but imagine the blocks from Minecraft. Now imagine those blocks are very small and capable of forming a smooth, semi-realistic looking world. This would allow players to morph and demorph the environment, digging out tunnels and mines, casting spells that created massive craters in the earth, discovering ancient cave systems filled with powerful enemies, etc. The goal here was to create a dynamic world that would be fun to explore and easy to render. On top of that, Everquest Next is supposed to feature smart NPCs, each with their own likes, dislikes, and general behaviors. Orcs, for example, are aggressive, like gold, but hate highly populated areas, so once they spawn in the world, they'll naturally gravitate towards roads with few guards, supposedly to rob trader and merchant NPCs. It's implied that, if the orcs are left to their own devices, they'll become a stronger presence in the area and possibly disrupt the game's economy in some way. This activity would spawn a dynamic quest where players would have to destroy the orcs in order to keep the roads safe. This system supposedly works with every mob, NPC, and quest in the game, creating an organic, living world as opposed to the typical static MMO experience. Now, something like this isn't completely unrealistic. Ultima Online originally had an AI system that works similarly to this, where mobs had their own organic behavior patterns and reacted naturally to their environment. It didn't end up working too well for that game, but it's 2015. Who says it can't work now if the right people are behind it? Now, if a living AI system wasn't enough, there was also scripted content called rallying calls. Each rallying call was like a chapter in a story, and the players would supposedly shape the world based on how they responded to the rallying call. Let's use the example SOE actually gave us when they revealed this information. A particular rallying call urges players to go into the frontier and create a settlement. Players who enjoy mining can dig for resources, and lumberjack players can cut down trees to build city walls. If the miners dig too deep, they may discover a boss-level monster that more combat-oriented players have to take down. And if the lumberjack players get attacked by goblins, someone's going to have to protect them. Now, the most intriguing part of these supposed rallying calls was that once they were done, they could never be completed again. That settlement is now a permanent fixture on the world that players actually helped create. That would be slightly different on each server, depending on how players chose to build it. In a lot of ways, Everquest Next seemed like a dream for MMO players. A world that's actually alive, a world that actually responds to your actions, a world that actually changes, a world where your choices actually matter. So what exactly went wrong? Well, pretty much everything. The game was pitched to us not only as an innovative game, but as a collaborative project between the developers and the players. We would get to take part in the development. By buying a game called Landmark, basically Minecraft set inside of Next's engine, we would help build assets and develop architecture that would actually make it into the MMO. On top of that, the developers would talk to us directly about what we wanted, and polls were constantly put on their website that actually determined certain features and development choices. This transparent philosophy didn't last long. The first sign something was wrong was when SOE's brand manager, Omid Dariani, an active member of the subreddit, suddenly quit, citing ideological differences that couldn't be resolved. He went on to say that he felt the company was planning on moving away from a community-first attitude, and that he chose to leave as a result. Now, at the time, this was surprising, but not enough to break our enthusiasm for the game. One person leaving, even a person we had come to know well, was not going to stop the hype train. Not many people anticipated what would happen next. About a year ago, SOE was sold to Columbus Nova, the US-based affiliate of the Renova Group, one of the largest strategic investment groups in Russia. Does that sound like a cartoonishly sinister corporation to you? Well, it did to a lot of fans. This is when people started getting a little nervous. People started claiming that Everquest Next was going to be cancelled, that holding companies like Columbus Nova were known for milking companies dry for a quick profit, and some even claimed that Everquest Next was just a ploy to ensure SOE was sold to the highest bidder. This is when the term vaporware started to get thrown around, justly or not. At the time, we were assured by the developers, as well as some members of the fanbase, that nothing was changing. Everquest Next was still on, and this transition was just the next step in an evolving company. SOE changed its name to Daybreak, and things were quiet for a while. Then shit got real. Storybricks, the company that Daybreak was using to create its revolutionary AI system, closed down. While Daybreak assured us that they didn't need Storybricks this far into development to complete their AI system, the fact that we had barely seen a proof of concept, a basic engine, and some concept art of the game after 2 years left many people wondering just how far the game had really come. As if things couldn't get any worse, people started getting laid off. Just like the cynics predicted, change was coming to the newly founded Daybreak. 140 people were laid off, including many people the fanbase had come to know over the years since the game's announcement. Even Dave Georgeson, the face of the company, was let go. At this point, the community was confused, concerned, and had quite a bit of questions. What's going to happen to Everquest next? What exactly has changed? What stayed the same? These questions were met with relative silence. Daybreak had been slowly becoming more reclusive ever since Omid left, but the layoffs seemed to be a breaking point for the company. The official forums were closed, developers visited the subreddit less and less, and the once transparent company became even quieter than the average studio. Despite claims that Daybreak would be shifting its focus back to Everquest Next, the only thing the developers seem to be talking about now is Landmark, Everquest's Minecraft game. Every month or so, a new workshop video is put out, showing stuff players have made in the game along with the occasional piece of concept art for the actual MMO. The elephant in the room is conveniently being ignored. As if to add salt to the wounds, Landmark wasn't quite the success people had hoped it would be. Yes, its building mechanics were much more precise and extensive than those in Minecraft, but there just wasn't much to do. People were tired of hearing about the game, especially when the only thing they really wanted to know more about was the MMO. Many people felt they were just treading water, creating content for a game that was never going to see the light of day. Now, some people claim that everything the fans are doing in Landmark is helping the development of Everquest Next. Hell, the developers themselves said that early on in the game's development. Because of that, people are told that they shouldn't be complaining, that we're watching the game grow and evolve as we play Landmark. That argument would make sense if not for the fact that Daybreak stated they were splitting the base code between Landmark and Next. Now, I'm not entirely sure what that means, but based on what I've been told, it essentially makes Landmark and Next less connected than they were originally intended to be. This whole time, players were told that Landmark was a sandbox version of Next, that they had all the resources the developers had, and that by participating in Landmark they were developing Next. Now that the code has been separated between the two, there's no way of knowing how much of that is still true. At this point, the subreddit has become a wasteland. It seems like a ghost town with the occasional specter branding the game as vaporware, usually followed by a thread about how people need to stop whining and to let Daybreak take their time. It seems the gaming community at large has forgotten Everquest Next, and is little more than a sore memory that the average MMO enthusiast would rather forget about. I wouldn't be surprised if this was your first time hearing about the game in months. So why do some people care so much about this game after all this time? What is it about this game that's become such an open wound in the minds of MMO players? I think there's a lot of reasons, but in my mind it comes down to two very important things that created this perfect storm of vitriol and distrust. 1. The developers promised to be open with us, to share with us, to let us get involved with making the game. Ever since Omid left, that community-based development slowly but surely started to dwindle. If this were a typical game, people would expect this sort of silence. But when you start by creating a personal relationship with your fans, it stands to reason they'll be concerned once you decide to clam up. 2. This game means a lot to a lot of people. Everquest is a series that, for better or worse, people's lives were affected by. Friends were made, relationships started, conflicts were settled, all within the world of Norath. For these people, and the general MMO community, Everquest Next was a second chance to capture that magic. Not only that, it was a game that could actually, finally be the one that broke the status quo in a meaningful way, a game that completely redefined MMOs, opening up the floodgates for many more, just like the original Everquest did. If that dream is suddenly lost due to corporate mismanagement, it's going to upset a lot of people, and it looks like that's already starting to happen. Is Everquest Next vaporware? I don't think so. I'm certain there is a passion for this project, that there's a good game beneath all this conflict and hardship. I believe that from the beginning, this game was intended to be very real. Whether or not this game comes out, on the other hand, is wholly dependent on whether or not Columbus Nova sees it as a good investment. From what I've read, investment companies like this aren't looking for big, risky projects, but a source of stable income. If Everquest Next begins to look like too much trouble, Columbus could easily cut funding, lay off more people, and move the rest into other more lucrative projects to compensate. If this happens, the likelihood of Everquest Next actually coming out, at least in a satisfying way, becomes less likely. So what was the point of all this? Why did I take you down this road and tell you the story of a game that may never even be released? Well, I think it's a good object lesson on how ambition and passion alone don't make a game. We normally look at this sort of thing from the perspective of failed Kickstarters and small indie companies who bite off more than they can chew, but AAA companies are susceptible to this as well. All it takes is some mismanagement, a few disagreements, and a couple layoffs to turn a good idea into a forgotten project. I like to think that most games start with good intentions and good talent, but somewhere along the line, the right things end up going very wrong. As cynical as it sounds, I don't think Everquest Next will be the last MMO with lofty ambitions that ends up in life support, and that's a shame. The MMO genre is something that is in desperate need for an overhaul, and a game that can provide a truly living world and make the player feel like a truly important part of the story is something the genre sorely needs. But hey, that's just my opinion.